All right, everybody, welcome to the future and imaging of music. I'm Lopez, and we're about to get started, but before we do, I want to do a couple acknowledgments. We have our Dean, Solomon Cross, here. This is his idea, and he brought this to us down the music lab and said, let's make something cool happen for our students, and we couldn't have had this happen without his leadership, so big ups to him. Here, give him another one, let's do it. I also like to thank all the students who contributed to the playlist that you guys heard. That's all student work. Thank you for everyone. I see a couple of you guys out there. We also like to thank Zach Graff, our event manager, who's doing all the running around, texting us on the weekends, making sure things are right. Let's give him a round of applause. We also have the amazing people in the office and IT staff to thank. Rochelle Allen in strategic marketing for taking photos here. Let's give them all a round of applause, please. And I'm going to hand it off to my partner in crime over here, Zac Matthews, to introduce our guests for the evening. All right,
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a great pleasure that we're getting to do this and we're getting to share with you some of these discussions that we've all been having in the back rooms, talking about the state of the music industry. And it's fun to get to do it with you and for you. And also, what a great pleasure, our guest, Valerie Morehouse. What a great pleasure for us to have an opportunity to talk with her. Valerie has found herself an interesting place in the music industry, and probably some of you have checked this stuff out with the client list. I thought it would be fun. I don't know if you, and I stole all this from your website, I'm sorry.
That's pretty cool.
Thievery, right? If you went and you looked, you might have been on that client page on the website, but just take a look. I actually just did a thing that should autoplay, but it isn't, so I'm gonna click this button. Call out any names if you recognize anybody up here. Go on, this is a fun game. I love this audience participation. So as you can see from this rather remarkable list of people, Valerie's been able to work with some of the greatest. I stole your Instagram too, I'm sorry. Had the opportunity to work with some of the biggest artists, and also with all kinds of people that you haven't heard of yet. People who are working at this incredible level in the music industry, in the sports industry, even in the politics industry. And how about this? Even in the Kardashian industry. So, here we go. All right. So, what I wanted to do was, I've known Valerie for a long time, and you got kind of fancy on us, and I've been wanting to bring you here, but it's kind of like it had to be the right thing. And suddenly, here we are. We have the right thing. We had the right event. So we're going to turn this into a conversation about music, about Valerie, about the world that you inhabit, and just kind of see where that goes. So what I'll do is I'll switch mics. Done standing. It's been a long day. And I just prepared some questions, and we'll see how much we stay on track with all of these. But what I'd like to do with Val is just start with a discussion on your path to this really interesting place in the music industry. And going back in time, when did you first realize that you wanted to be a musician? And what did your training in the early part of your career look like?
Well, anyway, welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us tonight, guys. For those of you that I got a nice warm welcome from Zac here. I'm Valerie Morehouse. And that's a big question because I've always been a musician. I've always been a singer. I sang as a child. I did all the musicals. I did choir. I did that path. I went to Chapman University where I studied opera. But I always wanted to be a pop star. That was my big thing. I wanted to be a big pop star. And, I grew up listening to a lot of the 80s bands, and we didn't have we were just getting sort of Britney Spears, and, we had Debbie Gibson, who was, I don't know if any of you remember Debbie Gibson.
Oh, yeah.
What was a full circle moment for me was I used to listen to her, and I used to sing her songs into a pencil in my room. And, I didn't know that all these years later that I would be training her, and that she would be one of my clients. And so I've had a lot of full circle moments. But I've always wanted to sing, and I've always wanted to be musical and be a performer. I really think of myself more as a performer and a singer rather than a musician. When I think of musician, I think of people like you that really play and stayed in their theory class. I wanted to drop out of mine.
And now teach them.
Yeah, I thought 8 a.m. I don't want to do that. That's way too early.
They're always at 8 a.m., aren't they?
Why are they always at 8 a.m.?
Mine were always at 8 a.m.
Ugh.
And some of ours are. Some of y'all are in the later ones. Well done. Good planning.
Yeah, so I think the shorter answer is I've always been a singer. I knew that I was going to sing when I was 4 years old, and that was my path, and that was going to be my path, but I had no idea where that was going to take me.
Right. So now, forgive me for what comes next. When we first met, we did, and I'm not going to get into what it was because it was a really unique thing, but we ended up on tour together. And there might be some pictures.
Oh, no.
Yeah. There might be some pictures. Valerie came on as the evil diva.
Oh, I remember that. That was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. And
I'm going to get that from you after.
I've got it. And so this was our crew, and there's Val in the middle. That's me right behind her on her right, nice. Looking, I don't know, evil diva-ish, but. This show that we did wasn't just singing, it was dancing, mm-hmm. It was acting, it involved incredible high levels of multimedia. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I'm bringing all of this up is because it was incredibly difficult. And you were called on short notice to pull this thing off. Choreography, mm-hmm. Singing, and it was operatic style. It was the evil diva, keyword diva, with a very operatic, and it was the show was an hour and a half of nonstop music, mm-hmm. On stage the whole time. And so just to be functional in the show, you had to be a verified triple threat. Singing, dancing, acting, and all of it. Right. That's a picture of me. I'm pretty sure I'm looking at you. Dancing up a storm. Dig the necklace, though. That's partly why I zoomed in there.
I love that.
Because we had the best costumes, right?
Yes.
But here was the fun thing.
That's fun.
I love this. That was fun. We just talked about this, how we haven't seen each other for quite a long time, and it's as if we just left off. And when you're touring with people, when you're getting the opportunity to really experience the world. This was in Philadelphia. You did 3 weeks in Philadelphia.
Yeah, it was long.
We had a residency, and we did a bunch of shows, and we really saw Philadelphia. This is the Philadelphia Museum of Art. We went to the Barnes collection. We did so much stuff. But what's fun is this crew here. So evil diva, not so evil. I mean, look, she's wearing pastel yellow, right? We had some of our colleagues here. Susie was in Cats on Broadway. Joel and Melissa did thousands of shows of Wicked. This guy, Christian, one of the best guitar players you'll ever hear or meet. His dad was Mike Nesmith from the Monkees. He played with Air Supply. He did all kinds of great stuff. So when you get into this level with these great people, we had so much fun doing hardcore music, and also just, we're going to talk maybe about being on the road. This was actually pretty good, because
it was fun.
There was weirdness, but we got to do cool stuff, and for me, we got to meet these really great people, and so I just wanted to show that, because I was like, that's a fun memory of just good people seeing the world together in a way that you get to do when you're performing, and that's part of the dream. And we, in small doses, we got to do some of that.
Right.
So you got yourself to that level. You got yourself there, and I witnessed it, and there are pictures to prove it. What I'd like to understand a little bit is from there, when we were touring. At this time, we were talking about teaching, and I remember you talking about your studio. And I'm really curious about that transition for you, because for a lot of our students are trying so hard to be the best musicians in the world, but that may not be where you end up. And you might end up somewhere gloriously different, which I feel like you've ended up somewhere gloriously different, completely related. So can you tell us a little bit just about that transition period?
Yeah, so I grew up thinking that I was going to be a pop star, and I was going to be like Debbie, and I was going to follow in those footsteps, even though I didn't really realize years later we're kind of the same age. I thought she was so much older back then. I don't know why. But I thought I was going to be this writer, pop star. I was going to go out into the universe and do what I've done my whole childhood. And somewhere in high school, I developed vocal nodes. I don't know if anybody knows what those are. It's led me to the path that I'm on now. I do a lot of vocal rehab with the ear, nose, and throat, the laryngologists, and I deal with some horrific stuff that entails the voice and the anatomy. And back in the 80s, there wasn't a surgery. There was. Julie Andrews had it, and it messed up her voice, right? She had 3 botched surgeries, or two botched and then 2 trying to fix. And so I had developed nodes. There was not a lot of help. I had an ENT that told me to go to Japan or somewhere humid, which I did end up doing in college, just to breathe in the humidity. And I just felt very alone. We didn't have phones. We didn't have personal computers. We had them in the libraries, but we didn't have text, and it was very isolating because I couldn't call anyone. I was on vocal rest all the time. I didn't know how to get rid of them. The speech pathologist at the time didn't really help me because they didn't understand the singers. They only understood regular speakers and orators. And so there was this wide open path that I saw. There was this big hole in the music business. And I had always thought, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I got a job out of Chapman University where I studied opera in the music business. And I got hired by Madonna, and I went in to not train her, but work for her record label. And I just got into the music business, and I realized very quickly it wasn't something I wanted to do. I didn't want to be with these people. I didn't want to be in a cubicle. I didn't want to be getting screamed at by bosses, and I just didn't like the environment. I didn't like the atmosphere. And so I had gone too far into my 20s now, trying to get a real job because I couldn't be a waitress again. I had done that, and I went to school, and I needed a real job. So I worked in the music business, in music and marketing and sales, and somebody asked me to teach their child, and I thought, gosh, teaching is really personal, and it's very difficult, and it's not, you can be a great singer and be a terrible teacher. I mean, you can do that. You can also be a great singer and a great teacher. But I think I started to help singers get through some issues, mental, emotional, physical, and I really had a vibration toward it. I really felt like I'm really good at this. And so I had a moment in time when I was teaching, and it was very profound. I was teaching a young girl who's now a huge star. She's an actress. She was my first sort of celebrity, but she was struggling with some things emotionally and physically as a singer, and I was able to get her off the books for surgery. And so I went in and I sat with the doctors, and I said, back in the 90s, you could do that. You can't do that now. I sat in on office visits and learned about anatomy and got a lot of training and threw myself into books and finding out about anatomics and physicality. And I was able to coach her through her nodules, and they ended up shrinking and going away just by technique. And I just had this light bulb moment. It was almost as if I will tell you that someone chose me to teach. That was not my path. If you told me that I was going to be teaching, I would get really pissed. Like, I'm not a teacher. I'm not doing that. I'm a singer. I'm a performer. And that was a very offensive thing to me for some reason. I couldn't understand why. And it just came out of nowhere, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was that one class, and I thought, oh my God, I'm supposed to teach. I'm supposed to show people how to get through their issues. I'm supposed to bridge the gap between speech pathologists and ENTs and help these singers kind of night after night after night. And, just piggybacking on that, some of you may have remembered, some of you may not, but Napster had just been a thing in the 90s, and there was all this music pirating going on, and I was at Maverick Records, which was Madonna's label, and I thought, whoa, these singers are not selling records anymore. Albums were records, now records are singles, and albums are albums, and so everything changed. And I just remember thinking, these singers are going to be dying on the vine because their money is going to come from touring. And it's not going to come from $15.99 walking into Tower buying a CD or a vinyl or a tape or whatever generation you're from. And so I thought there's this space that needs to be filled, and I couldn't find anyone filling it. I mean, to be really honest, I had a lot of voice teachers, and some of them were very inspiring. Some of them were not. Most of them kind of didn't know what they were doing. And I felt like my parents wasted a lot of money and a lot of time. And I thought, my God, if I'm going to be a teacher, I'm going to be the biggest voice coach in the world. And I was 28. and I think I did it. I think
and look what happened.
Yeah.
Well, that leads me to kind of the next question that you teed me up nicely to tee you up for the next thing. You can't just become the biggest vocal coach without having a certain skill set, without having a certain level of professionalism, and also just an approach and a psychology of that's now my direction, right? You pointed at that. This is what I talk about. Some of y'all have been in my business classes. It's like, point the prow of your ship at the thing you want to do, and don't take your eyes off of it. And so that must have been part of this. But what do you feel like were those skills that you developed that really separated you from the pack? Because there's plenty of voice teachers out there who would love to be, vocal coach to the stars. Yeah. What do you think, and this is really along the lines of skill development, and what can we, who are sitting here listening, what can we do to develop our skills to that kind of professionalism?
Boy, that's a really good question. I feel like there's a lot of answers to that because I feel like it's multifaceted. For me, I want to start with, I was a really good singer. I mean, at baseline, I felt like I could sing a little bit of opera and a little classical, and I was in choir, and I could sing pop, and I kind of understood all the genres, but here was my Achilles heel, which I'm going to sidebar for a quick moment. I would record, and I would have producers say to me, because I was doing demoing, and I was doing all that in LA, as one does, trying to get into the business, and, I can be a teacher, and then be a demo singer, and, it was just a rat race. And I learned that I would get a note where the producer would say, it's just too perfect. I need you to make it messier and dirtier. And it was part of my opera training. Yeah. And so I have one of my singers is Sia. And I remember training her when I first had her, and she is so fantastic as a writer. As an artist, I can't write like that. It's not my gift. And she leaned over, and I was trying to show her how to do something, and she said, "You have the purest, most powerful instrument I have heard on anybody." And I looked at her and I said, "Sia, if I had your writing ability and your style, I wouldn't be a teacher." So I feel like we all have our gifts, right? And not one is better than the other, but I think you have to start with, I had a lot of voice teachers that couldn't sing, like weren't very good. And I thought, well, this is bizarre, and so I think that's part of it. So you have to have that element. I think the next element was being a businesswoman. So there's a big business behind music business. I understood business. So I was in marketing and sales, and I went on to Left Bank Management, where we did En Vogue, Duran Duran, Shania Twain, Motley Crue, Prodigy, Deftones, Michelle Branch, Alanis Morissette. I got to work on all these records. And I learned the business aspect of it. And I think the third part is being an empath. I'm very empathetic to these singers and what they're going through physically and mentally and emotionally, because I felt it. I felt very alone. I couldn't pick up the phone because I was on voice rest. I couldn't text because it didn't exist. I couldn't send an email because I didn't have a personal computer, because it was 1995 or 1989 when all of this happened for me. So I felt very isolated and very alone. And I think it's understanding where your student is coming from. So I think it's the business acumen. It's really being a very good singer and being able to morph between an opera student and death metal at the end of the day, right? And everything in between, but also understanding what they're going through on a physical and an anatomical level. So I think all those things coming together make you a triple threat. So that was my triple threat. Not triple threat singing, dancing, acting, but my triple threat as a vocal coach.
Yeah. So our guest next week is Ari Herstand, who has written this book that a lot of us are reading. It's in its third edition now in 6 years, and one of the things that he did with this book was to add a chapter, and I'll paraphrase the name of the chapter because I'm sure I'll get it wrong otherwise. It's the chapter is called 100 Jobs in the Music Industry That Are Not Artist.
Yeah, right.
And I think this is something that we don't do enough to focus on when we're, especially in academia, in the schools, we don't focus on the fact that music is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And the people who are standing in the front with the microphone are really a little tiny fraction of that. And there's all of this other work. We're not all going to end up being that person at the front with the microphone.
Most won't.
Most won't. To a factor of what, 1,000 to 1 or 10 million to 1. I don't even know. I should know these statistics. But the fact is, you found this niche. It wasn't what you thought it was going to be, but this is what happens. And so we will do well, all of us, to understand the sort of the entirety of the music business. And you got that experience by being in those different areas before you eventually meandered your way there. And honestly, you said a minute ago, your parents wasted money maybe on some teachers that weren't ideal, but it could be said in that moment, you learned that it's important to have a certain skill set. We learn by our successes. We learn, in some cases, more by the failures. Maybe that was money well spent. You have a sense of what that should look like by working
what not
with great...
to do.
Yeah, by understanding the great teachers and also understanding what it means to be not so much.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of coaches that are coaches, and there's a lot of teachers that are teachers, and people don't realize that those are not mutually exclusive. Yeah. So where I sit, I would never want to say anything disparaging about a teacher. They're doing what they do with what they know, right? And so, one of the things that I think has gotten me where I'm at is I was always very open to surrounding myself by people who were smarter than me. Doctors, surgeons, but the interesting thing that now they will tell you, I can't do what Valerie does, and I can't do what they do. I'm not a doctor. I'm not performing surgery. I didn't go to medical school. But we need each other. We need each other. And so there's these other professions and other things going on that are at play. And, you know, just being a vocal coach is giving tips. There's like you could be a performance coach and not understand why you're not getting better. You're not getting better because you're not with a teacher. A teacher is anatomical and physical, like athletics. And so you have a lot, you're going to see it when you get out there. You're going to have a lot of teachers that you don't understand why you're not getting better, and it's not your fault. I always tell them it's my fault. If my student doesn't understand something, I don't understand something because I'm not relating it to them in a proper way. And so I always take that onus on myself. And the reason that you're not getting better is because you've employed a vocal coach, but they're not a voice teacher, if that makes sense. And we see a lot of that in the business. We have a couple people that have been doing it. They're older than me. They're in their 60s now. They've been around a really long time. Lovely people. I know them very well. They have a lot of big artists, but they're not technicians. And so when I get a lot of their students, I'll hear them say, so-and-so never taught me this. I don't know anything about my anatomy. I don't know where anything is. I don't know what cricothyroid is. I don't know what the larynx is doing. I don't understand bridges. I didn't even know I had a bridge. I don't even know where it is and what it is. Nobody's talked to me about modifying vowels. Nobody's talked to me about all the things that I need to know to take my power. And a teacher to me is someone that gives you the information so that you become powerful. A coach is something different. So you have to also, if you're singers and you're looking for teachers, you have to figure out who are the coaches, the performance coaches that are helping you smile, and it's great, and you'll sing this, and oh, that's so great, you know, and that's all fine. And let's sing through the song, and you're done. You know, I always felt very like, what the hell was that? You know, I'd walk out, and I knew something was wrong, I just didn't know what it was until I knew better. So I would tell all of you, find out if you're with a voice teacher or a performance coach, because a lot of these singers think that they're with vocal coaches that are teachers, and they're not really teaching you about your anatomy. So I think it's important to separate who those people are.
Yeah. I actually want to sidestep from where I was going to go next, because I'm really curious on some of the physical teaching side of things. I want to know about your vocal trainer. And I know you brought one.
I did.
Because it's an interesting direction that you've gone with this. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm going to pick it up and show you guys. This is my little guy right here. This is the best thing that I've used in 30 years of teaching. I know, I'm a fossil, but we won't talk about that. All right, so it's got my name on it, and I did not invent this. This was invented by my partner. His name is Braden Oswald, and he is, to me, a kid. He is 26. He is an engineer, and he has a very interesting story. And I get sent things all the time. I get sent straws, and I'm like, who cares? It's a straw. We get it. It's SOVT. All right. So there's something in singing called semi-occluded vocal tract training. And what that is when you're singing, there's a lot more that goes into this, but I'm going to give you the abridged version. You don't want to use strap muscle to sing. You only want to use your vocal cords, which are made of muscle. They come together, they phonate and they vibrate, and you don't want your larynx hiking up too high to choke you out. So when singers get to choruses and they get to difficult bridges and their songs are very high, sometimes they write songs that are in the sweet spot, but then they can't sing them. So what we did with this guy is we were blowing through water and straw for decades. We're like, you know, what that does for you is it has back pressure, and the back pressure allows the vocal cords to come together and phonate, but it shuts down the neck muscles. So we're not grabbing, and we're not going into head voice all the time, sounding like Mrs. Doubtfire, right? So as a pop singer, you don't want to do either of those things. You want to sing organically, and you want to sing on the voice like you're speaking on pitch, and that's what pop singers do, and metal singers, and R&B singers. And so Braden sends this to me, and it sits on my desk for months. I'm in tour season. I'm crazy busy. I'm like, another thing. I pick it up, and I thought, wow, this is so interesting. It looks like this little kazoo that I've had in my head for 20 years. I'm not a designer. I can't draw. I'm not an art. I'm not any of that. So he put it together. He had something called MTD, and there's also it's vocal dysphonia, and there's also spasmodic dysphonia, which comes from a virus and or post-traumatic stress disorder. So Braden had a history in his family. He is not a singer. He was just a psych student. And he was going to speech therapy, and he was blowing through all these straws and water, and he was getting wet. And the same thing that I struggle with my clients. He was getting wet, and he forgot his bottle, and then he had too much water, and he's pouring it out, and there's water all over the floor. He's got the wrong straw. He's, using one that's too small, and there's too much back pressure, so now he's trying to find a fat straw, because the sizes and the diameters change the amount of pressure on the vocals. So what he did was he drew this up for himself, and he says, what if there's a tool we could use for singers that they could kind of hum and vocalize into, and sing their songs and vocalize into, that created the chord closure but got rid of all the strap muscle and the tension, helped with vocal dysphonia, because what dysphonia is using too much strap or cricothyroid muscle, and squeezing and not using the vocal cords. And so basically you want the vocal cords to wake up and the strap muscle, the neck muscle, to go to sleep. So it's kind of like rubbing your head and patting your tummy at the same time. This does it for you. So what he does is got a lever on it, and it's got an opening, and it's got notches on it to show you your notch 1, notch 2, notch 3, notch 4. There's very little opening in this right now. It's very difficult. But if I open it all the way, I'll do, John Lennon's Let It Be, right? If we're singing, I'm not blowing through it, but I'm, I'm right here. I'm in my mask. I'm going from chest to mix to head voice. I'm completely bypassing my neck. This shuts down the neck muscle and the larynx automatically. It will physically not allow you to engage the muscles that screw you up as a singer. It will only let you engage the vocal cords, like doing a sit-up. You're not using your back and your neck to get you up. You're only using your core and your abs. So I started using this, and my eyes almost bugged out of my head, and I was doing a really difficult song, and I said, let's see if this thing works, because this is what I have had in my head. He drew it, he made it, he came up with it. I started running scales, and after about, I'm not even kidding, like a minute, I tried one of the hardest songs that I've ever had to sing, and I had it in a second, like right in the morning. And I called him up, and I said, hey, I know we haven't met, and I know that you sent this to me months ago, and I apologize. I just picked up your little tool, and I have one question for you. He said, what's that? And I go, please tell me you have a bunch of patents on this. He said, I have 7. I said, let's chat. So that's how this came about. It's the best thing that I've used, yeah.
The business.
The business. It's the best tool that I've used in all my years of singing now. It's the best tool I've used in 30 years of teaching. All my singers use it. Sam Smith won't go anywhere without it. And all my singers use it, and this is what I start my classes with, and this is what I have my singers blow into, because it's not just for pop singers, it's for opera singers, it's for classical singers, choir, anybody that wants to strengthen their instrument and doesn't want to do damage because they just don't know what they're doing on their own, or they can't afford a really skilled teacher, or maybe they have a really skilled teacher that's at one of the colleges, right? Some of the best teachers are at the colleges and universities, but you can get this and do it on your own, and you literally can't mess it up. So if you guys don't know about this and you're singers or you teach singing, I highly recommend swapping out the water and straw and getting yourself a vocal trainer. It's bettervoice.store is where you get it. And we have an Instagram, bettervoice.co, where I show you how to use this, and my artists show you what it's done for them in their voices, and I also write about it in my book. So
awesome, cool, thank you. No, I was curious because I'd seen some of the videos, and I'm like, that looks interesting. I'm not a singer, so it's kind of like, check that out, but I get to hear it straight from you, so that's fascinating. And I think that also really speaks to the attention that you're putting on the real physiological side of not just singing songs well, but singing well. So I appreciate that. That's one of the things that's really been working for you. So now I'll go back to the regularly scheduled programming. What was the next question?
I could talk about this stuff for hours. So
I want to talk about.
I'm going to nerd out.
I want to talk about vulnerability a little bit, because being a singer has an incredible level of openness and vulnerability, and that can be really challenging for a lot of people. You're working with lots of different people, but you're also working at this upper echelon of the star types who are surrounded by people who are trying to make them feel good. And they're surrounded by, probably half of them have some level of imposter syndrome, if not all of them.
A lot of them.
A lot of them. You are now in a room with them, you're alone with them, and your job is to tell them what they're doing wrong in this astonishingly vulnerable space. I would love to know how you, as a teacher in that environment, how do you manage that? Because I'm guessing eventually you must end up managing that side of it, just the emotional side of working with these folks. Maybe they've come to you with problems and they're hoping that you'll solve them. Also a very, very exposed emotional place.
So the emotional part of it for most singers is far more difficult than the physical part. So I find the emotional part very challenging, but in the best way, because I have to know, do I have a very skilled teenager in front of me? Do I have a boy going through puberty who's somehow got a record deal and the label hasn't thought that his voice is going to change? Whoops. He comes back the next summer, he's a completely different singer. I'm like, you should never sign somebody that age. I think this is what can truly happen. Am I dealing with a huge rock star with a big ego that has done it and sold millions and millions and millions of records, and now they have a problem? Now they have vocal dysphonia or spasmodic dysphonia or some type of trauma, and they have an ego, and here's me coming in telling them what they're doing wrong, and they're, one of the biggest stars of the last 3 decades. I have to figure out, am I dealing with a young female who's got anxiety? And most of my singers have a lot of anxiety. Musicians, artists, because not only are we anxious as people, we become anxious with social media and TikTok and Instagram and who's got more followers, and there's that. But we've also are very anxious because we're also comparing ourselves to everybody else constantly, and it's kind of a dog-eat-dog business. And so the emotional aspect of it for them is very scary. Half the time they can't do the scale or the exercise that I need them to do because they're afraid. They're not leaning in, they're not going for it. So oftentimes I'll have them push into a chair or use their quad muscle, or we'll be doing the trainer and the quad at the same time so they can transfer the fear into a leg part, right? Get it off the neck muscle. It's all making them comfortable. And I think the emotional side of it, and there's a lot in my book about that as well, is very debilitating for singers. And I have to be able to break that person down, understand who they are in 5 minutes, and begin to train them. And that is, I have to be able to speak to their ego, their fear, their anxiety, their strengths, their weaknesses, very, very quickly. Because if you don't know how to do that with a human being, you're going to lose them. And you're going to lose them quickly. You can be the most skilled teacher on the planet, but maybe you don't have the personality. You can have the best personality in the world, but maybe your student's not getting the results they need. Those two things really, really have to collide. And I think it's a rare ability to be an empath and understand. So Zac, it's a combination of knowing who's in front of you and being able to teach them and have them respect you and not get angry with you because they have an ego, but also stroke them in the appropriate moment and give them the accolades that they're searching for so that they feel comfortable with you and they don't feel like an imposter. I have a lot of singers that have gone viral, and they have a record deal and they don't know what they're doing. They have no clue. They didn't grow up in bands. They don't grow up in bars. They got famous on TikTok. Right. I had a guy that had a huge song. Fortunately for him, he was a D1 basketball player, and so he understood pressure and athleticism. And he rolled up his sleeves with me. I had 3 weeks, and his first show ever in front of an audience was Lollapalooza. And that is what these kids are facing now. Yeah. They're facing There's no training. And I'm battling constantly with the suits because the labels and even the management's usually pretty great, sometimes not, but I'm battling with their team that doesn't really understand what goes into being a singer. They don't get it when somebody's sick. They're like, well, I don't understand why we have to cancel a show. Well, because they're going to hemorrhage, and then you're going to have nothing. You know, a hemorrhage is where the blood vessels in the vocal cords swell and they pop. And if you look on the scope, it's just blood on the vocal cord, inside the cord, in the muscle and the tissue. And it's very, very scary. And so the emotional aspects of that is really figuring out how to talk to people's teams. I mean, it's really complex. I mean, my job is not just scales. I mean, I vocal produce. I produced helped Michael Fitz with the Lats, Fitz and the Tantrums album. I go live with humongous stadiums with my ears, and I have their vocals in my pack, and I have to figure out what's working, what isn't, and why. I had one of my clients FaceTiming me from England. They walked off the stage, third song in, because they were so afraid they were going to hemorrhage because they'd hemorrhaged before, and a surgeon put them on the table that should never have put them on the table because the surgeon wanted the celebrity on his wall. This is the type of stuff. This is the type of stuff that I'm battling against constantly, and I will take you down because my main priority is my client. And the thing that makes me powerful now, not always, but now, I don't really care about anybody but my student. That's my main objective, because if you don't like me and the team doesn't like me, I'm out. I'm on to the next person that wants to listen to me, because I'm not going to have people down on my watch. There's just no way. I've worked way too hard to do that. So it's emotional, it's mental, it's multifaceted, and it is a business. It's not just sitting behind the piano teaching scales. It's battling with producers and collaborating with producers and collaborating with music directors and battling management. And then the labels saying, well, I don't understand why the singer has to cancel a show. And you know, you've got people now auto-tuning and melodyning and, tuning in their ears. And I'm like, no, we need to go back to analog and make them sing again. And then we'll just sweeten it a little bit if they need it.
Round of applause for that. Round of applause.
Yeah. It's teaching, it's bringing back real teachers and saying, I would just like to mention that I am a little harsh. I can be a little harsh. Even with my young people that come in, and I'm like, you have no idea what you're doing. You need to learn how to sing, because this is not going to fly when you are doing a 90-minute set and you're headlining. Your management is going to start freaking out. They're going to start putting tune on everything. Then they're going to start tuning in your ears on stage, so you don't even know what you're singing. And then you become an even worse singer because now your pitch is off and your ear is off. And then they're going to start melodyning all your tracks, and then you're going to lose yourself. So I bring it back to the organics of it, and even though the music business have all these bells and whistles, right, that we can use, I like to bring it down to its common denominator, go back to analog, and then sweeten it if they're desperate or they're going to lose their voice or they have a health issue. Then we can play with that a little bit, because I have singers that do 198 shows a year.
Yeah.
And that's intense. My chain smokers do 200 shows a year. Drew Taggart's not, he started out as a DJ. So there's a lot of stories. I'm off the beaten path, but you can see I'm very passionate about it because I've been doing it a long time and I've seen a lot. And so the job for me is not sitting one-on-one. It's their entire career and having to talk to every single person on that person's team to make them understand how delicate this is. We're not a guitar player with a cold. This is our athleticism, this is our instrument, and this is what we have to take care of and why.
And I did want to come to talking about vocal health specifically, and I think you've done a good job of really setting that up and describing, in some scary terms, I think, the importance of that. Are there any, for the singers that we have who are here, are there any specific tips that you can give just about staying healthy? About maintaining
As I'm
maintaining
coughing, I
the
drank
instrument.
my water the wrong way. I'm not sick, I swear. We say that now every time we're coughing. I'm not sick. I just drank my water weird. So staying healthy is, again, multifaceted. I think that I send my singers out with these little kits, and I say, look, especially my men, they don't take vitamins. especially the young guys are like, vitamin C, what? So you have to take vitamin C and you have to take zinc. You know, it's the bus driver, it drives the vitamin C. They've got nurses coming in with drips. A lot of them get Myers cocktail now, which is a vitamin drip. A lot of sleep, a lot of steam. Braden has a vocal steamer that's great too. It's affordable. It's handheld. Lots of different adjustments on it. You can do it the good old-fashioned way too, and just boil some water on a stove, and don't burn your lip on that thing, because I've done it. You put a towel over your head and kind of breathe the steam in. Humidifiers are great, but sleep is your highest currency. And the problem that we have in this business, rather than being in the athletic, even though we are doing something very athletic, is that singers are up late. They have meet and greets. They have time zones. They have plane travel. They have hotel. They're on the bus. They're getting woken up because they're driving into a part of Germany or Poland, or they've got to get up and do a stop. Everybody's got to be accounted for. They have to roll into a venue and be ready to hit the stage, and every venue is different depending on the acoustics. And one's outdoor, one's indoor, one's got a cement stage. So you're also battling against the elements. So being healthy is sleep. I would say is the highest currency. It is for me. Vocal rest. Do not underestimate the power of voice rest. And when I say voice rest, I mean no talking for like 24 hours, like not even hello. So before we had phones, I would go out with a whiteboard and I would write, I'm on vocal rest, not talking, on vocal rest, singer, something to that effect. And you'll find other people will be like, that's $10.99. You're like, no, I can hear you. I'm just not talking. So the really funny things that we used to do, I used to walk around with a board on, because when you go to meet and greets or you're having to greet your fans, it's exhausting. And the labels don't really fully understand what that looks like. You can't just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk all day, and sing and sing and sing and sing and sing all day, and talk and talk and talk after a show, and then travel and not sleep. And then if you're a drinker or you're doing drugs, you're throwing a whole nother bag of stuff on top of it. So a lot of it is telling my singers, hey guys, guess what? 15 drinks, that's not a good thing. That's not like a night out, right? We got to dial that back. So it's a balance, and so one of the things you might be, shocked to hear is that my students that are not on the wagon or are not sober, if they can balance it on tour, I'm like, have a glass of wine, have a couple beers. Like, you need to relax, because singing tense and being upset all the time, like I'm touring, singers are not meant to be athletes. There's a reason NFL players are the way that they are. There's a reason these athletes are able to sleep and go into those cold baths and, get up early and train. They're built like that. Singers are not. It's an athletic endeavor, but mentally and emotionally, they're rock stars. They want to be out late. They want to be doing all kinds of things not supposed to be doing. So the health of the tour and being on the road is really important. And it's really just about balance and sleep and vocal rest.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned sleep. I kind of have been working on that this year, and it's made a huge, huge difference.
Yeah.
I'm not doing very well right now. Sometimes we get busy.
I'm a napper. I like to stop and nap for 20 minutes and then do the end of the day.
But it is a remarkable, life-changing skill to develop. Like, I don't have to be up all night anymore.
No,
and
you don't.
You feel so much better. So
yeah. Sleep is huge.
Vote of confidence for sleep.
My singers are like, oh God, I took a nap, and I'm like, great, I got to warm you up again. If you go to sleep, guys, you go to sleep for, more than 20 minutes, or you fall into a REM state, if you will, your body swells. So you might get bags in the morning, or your hands hurt. Your hands are a little puffy. Your vocal cords swell as well. Mm-hmm. And so you have to kind of re-educate them they lengthen as you get higher in the scale, and they dampen as you come lower. And so you have to, like a rubber band, not stretch it too far, but just enough, where you have that pliability.
Yeah. So I want to veer into, and we touched on the idea of mental health. And I think it's really important that we just have conversations about mental health, because mental health is just health. And I think in our industry, because of some of the stresses and the anxiety and all of that you've talked about, I think we are slightly more prone, and I think that may be true, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that may be more true of the people at the highest level because the pressures are higher. And I have to imagine that some of your training sessions end up being you're the therapist for 3/4 of it. What I want to do by talking about this, and I don't even know if I'm leading you to a particular place with this question, but I'd just like to hear from you. I'd like for us to normalize this a little bit better, that to make sense of the fact that this is real and that it's okay to ask for help,
right.
and that we're seeing it everywhere and we're talking about it more, and we should talk about it much, much more. So I don't know if you have any insights in that area. I'm just sort of like floating that out there.
Yeah, that is a big part of my day. In fact, I really have to pick and choose because my clients are paying a fair amount of money to get trained. And it's my job to make sure they get what they need when they walk in and when they leave. The mental health part of it is difficult because I will every now and then have to stop. And the singer can't sing because there's something going on. I always tell, I have teachers that work for me, that work under me, and I always tell them, you have to keep the lesson going. Like, that's very important. They're there for a reason, and I don't ever want to be that teacher where I walk in and I'm spending an hour. I do 30 minutes because we work fast, but where they're spending an hour and there's 15 minutes of just, talking about nothing. I think if I have a client and a singer that walks in and I can see something is very wrong, I have to stop because they're not going to have a good lesson. They're terrified, and if they're terrified or they're upset, it's going to come out in the lesson. And as we all know, when we sing, it's very vulnerable. I've had grown men burst into tears. Like, I'm not kidding you. I've seen some stuff. They're, a huge actor, and he didn't want to come in, and I was on a bunch of TV shows. I did Nashville for 7 years, and I did Lucifer and a bunch of movies. I did, Tammy Faye with Jessica Chastain. And everybody's terrified. And all of my actors have come in tears because all of a sudden they have this big responsibility of playing a role. And so it's on the acting side too. Academy Award winners that have trained with me that are in tears because they feel like they're terrified to sing. Nashville was hard. I mean, Connie didn't sing. Connie Britton was not a singer. Callie Corey wrote this role for her. And I said to Callie, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with this. Like, Connie doesn't sing. And Callie said, get it done. I wrote it for her. I'm like, well, we have 3 weeks for the pilot. So there's a lot of that goes on. And I'll share a little sneaky story. We were in Nashville, we're shooting the pilot, and thank God the director at the time was a friend of mine and my husband's, and so I could get in there with him. Otherwise, the director's like, go away. I don't want to talk to the vocal coach. But one of my artists was terrified. They were terrified to sing. And so all the suits and the director and everybody Lionsgate wanted to come in and sit in on this vocal session. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, are you out of your mind? This is not a set. This is a safe space. These people have never sung before. You can't do that. They need to understand and do this on their own. And so I got this bright idea with the producer that we were going to record everything the night before. I've never told this story publicly.
Turn off the camera.
Yes, turn off at the camera, edit. And so I called the producer and I said, hey, I'm going to grab some whiskey and I'm going to grab my artist and we're coming out to your house tonight and we're going to record. And he's like, great. So we got our 2 songs done and it was really fun. And we got the singer to be comfortable and to feel okay in the space. And then the next day, we went in and we had everything comped and everything done. We had a couple little pickups we needed to do. So we had all the suits and the powers that be sitting in the studio thinking that they were part of something magical happening for the very first time. And the artist wasn't scared because the artist knew that the actor knew that we had it. It was in the bag. And so everybody was happy. Yeah. And, everybody's crying. And they're like, oh, this is going to be so amazing. People think their projects, everybody thinks their project is great, right? So it was kind of a nice little moment where that's how I protect my artists, is that when I said to you earlier, they're first, and, I'm going up against a massive studio. I mean, I could have been fired. But that is what I had to do to protect my artist, because I knew in my soul that if we did it their way, nothing would have gotten done, and it would have been a complete and utter disaster. And so those are the things that go on at that level, and the mental health part of it is massive. Yeah. And another guy, another actor, if you will, same thing, came in, found out he loved to sing. His parents sent him to boarding school. He was British, big, tough guy, you know, in all the movies, and he's like the lead guy in the movie, and he just burst into tears, and he turned around and his shoulders started going, and I thought, oh my gosh, he's crying. And he turned around, and I said, you got to sit down. What's going on? And he told me his story. And this is a grown man, and it was heart-wrenching, and he started singing, and he said, my mom told me that I was terrible. And he actually had a really good voice. I was shocked. I'm like, what? This guy, I said to him, I go, boy, you can really sing. And he sang on a series, and he did it. And so don't believe everything you hear. Don't believe sometimes what your parents tell you, because sometimes they don't know what they're talking about either. My sons will tell you that all the time. But there is a huge mental health aspect of it, and these singers are riddled with anxiety. I've seen it now. I'm in my 50s. I can tell you, living a little bit of life, it's terrifying for me to watch the mental health. And I will share this one last, kind of a little bit dark, but I think it's really important. One of my students killed themselves last year.
I'm so sorry.
He is the son of a major celebrity, that Academy Award winner that I trained, this artist, this actor, and their son. And I loved this guy. I've known him since he was 6 years old, and he would come to my very first house when I was teaching out of my house, and I had this tiny little house in Studio City. And there was some stuff going on, but the music business did not help him. His parents gave him all these opportunities and put him into a great school, and he went to a private school. But he was struggling with mental health, and he started self-medicating. And then he got into the music business and just felt less than. And he would say, I'm on Instagram, and I'm watching all my friends doing better, and I'm watching everybody getting all these likes. And it just fed the monster. And he was actually doing very well. That's why this all came as a shock to all of us. He was performing, he was finally singing and putting his music up, and he took his life on his 28th birthday. So I had a couple of those things happen in my career. I've had a couple of my students commit suicide, and I felt like, what could I have done? Like, there wasn't really anything I could have done, no. But you see the signs, and you realize, like, this is, from that being the most tragic story to singers just coming in crying. They can't even stand up to sing a scale. They're so terrified because they write. We all know Sia doesn't like to perform. Yeah. Right? She just did Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Chaka Khan. She comes out in her wig, and it's a public story, and we all know that. She's petrified. It's not her thing. It's just not her thing. Yeah. She's a phenomenal writer, but she's terrified. Barbra Streisand, her hands would shake, and she would use teleprompters. And now with social media and TikTok and Instagram and all these other things, at Snapchat, and I don't know, so many things. There's a level of anxiety to keep up and to deliver that is unprecedented, and it is a cancer that is poisoning our youth, our adults, the music industry. So I would say to those students, you have to block all of that noise out and be committed to your process and not attached to your outcome. Because if you're attached to an outcome, you're dead before you've started. But if you can take it day in and day out and just be a sponge and love, love, love what you're writing, what you're doing, nothing's going to be perfect. But if you really love what you're doing, and you're not doing it to get rich or to get famous or to have 100 million people on TikTok or whatever it is, if you stay committed to your process, you're going to be okay. If you start looking at your outcomes, you're not going to be so okay. Mental health is a huge problem, and it is something that I address in my book. That is something that we need to turn around, and we need to turn around quickly.
Yeah. Well, I think the point that you're making about...
Thank you. Yeah.
The point that you're making about outcomes that is exacerbated by social media is that everything is now an outcome. What you had for breakfast is an outcome and is worthy of comment by the whole world if you do it right/wrong. And so the pressure that comes from the idea of that everything that you're putting out there, everything has to be perfect all of the time. I think we need to spend a lot more time learning how to fail well.
Yes.
And the way we learn from failure is far more effective.
Yeah, and I tell that to people every day. I had that conversation with another student of mine, another actor that I train, that didn't think he could sing at all. And he's like, I have no business doing this film. I don't even know what I'm thinking. It was 7 years ago. We've done five films subsequently together, and now he's on his next. And I can't talk about it, I don't think yet, but he's going to be playing a very famous singer that we all know and love. His music is very uplifting, and he was struggling with the same thing of the outcomes. And I just said the same thing to him. I said, be committed to the process. Don't worry about being overwhelmed by this person producing the music. He's playing this person's life, and it's a big responsibility. And I said, you have to just be you when you walk in the door, and be committed to your process. And we needed to talk about that before we had a lesson. So I ended up having another singer cancel. Serendipitous, right? And so we were able to take an hour. I gave him a half an hour mental health conversation before he walked into this very scary meeting with this artist. And then we had a lesson, and I felt like I had sent him out in a good place.
Nice.
So
yeah, I think this is a topic we all need to just keep talking about this, and being aware of our own mental health, being aware of each other's mental health, talking openly about these things, and caring for one another, and maybe caring less about our outcomes and each other's outcomes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know that I have a client that has come to me and said, I never get nervous. I'm amazing. I can't wait to get out there. I don't think I've encountered that. I mean, most of my singers are terrified. I know that John Mayer doesn't relax until second song before the last, I think. I think he's good until his last song, and then he starts to chill. But it's very, very scary for a lot of people, and they think they want to be in this business, and then they see what it really looks like, and they're like, oh, crap, is this what I signed up for? This is not what I signed up for. Tour is hard. Music is hard. And if you want to go into this business, it is a hard business, physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Let's talk about tour just a little bit. You brought that up, and I think it's an exciting thing to look at from the outside. Oh, I get to go on tour. I get to do all these things. Even earlier today, I said we toured. It was fun, and that was more just about hang out with some really cool people and see. I loved Philadelphia. That was fun. I liked that. Fun. That was. I've asked me. I'll tell you. We have some great stories. But that was 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. That wasn't 190 shows.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for some of the artists that you're working with?
I mean, man, to be totally honest with you, full transparency.
That's what we're doing here.
Most of my artists hate tour. It's awful for them. I have some newbies that are like, I'm on the bus. I'm a rock star. This is so great. I'm like, wait till you roll into 23. You're going to hate it. Or 24, really. So it becomes a very monotonous life, without naming names, I guess, because I don't want to call anybody out that wouldn't want where they're at in their lives and their careers to be called out. But most people do not enjoy tour. It is a love-hate. And so they get on and they can't wait to get on tour because they feel like they're not relevant when they're home. Mm-hmm. And then they get on tour and they want to do anything but be on tour. So it's this constant battle within themselves. They get out there and they're yawning when I'm warming them up, and they're having to take a shot or whiskey in the throat coat or, whatever it is, just to get through the night. And I think that's why a lot of artists are addicts, are struggling with addiction. It takes a lot for them to get on. They're taking sleeping pills to sleep on the bus and the planes, and then they're getting up and they're drinking massive amounts of coffee, and then they have to be at the venue by 2, Show's not till 9, so it's a lot of sitting and waiting. And then they're tired, and so they get another coffee, and then it's showtime, so now it's time for a little whiskey or some vodka. I mean, it just doesn't stop. And then it rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So that's really hard to watch that. But tour life is really hard. There's, again, the meet and greets, and you have planes, and you have trains, and you have automobiles, and you have, to quote the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And there's a lot of... it's very glamorous on the outside. I don't like tour. I like to go in and do rehearsals, and I better get my clients dialed in, boy, because I am out. I am out. I don't want to be there. I've done the tours where I had to go to Asia and South America, and I'm so glad I got to travel and do that, and it was wonderful. But I get to leave. I get to leave after a week or 3. 3-4 is the most I've ever spent out on tour. Yeah. I was out with Sam twice. The last 6 months, setting up for tour rehearsals. I get the best of it. But when you're an artist and you're there day in and day out, it's the same thing over and over and over again. And it is kind of the definition of insanity. And there's not a lot of sleep. And all you want to do is go home. And the anxiety of having to perform every night is it's very difficult. You're worried about getting sick. You're worried about not sleeping on the plane. You're worried about the bus. You're worried about the hotel being loud. You're worried about having an early call. You're worried about the 2-hour meet and greet you had to have because the label needs more money. So you have to talk to your fans before the show, and you're already exhausted, and your voice already hurts, and now you got to go do a show. Now you get off the show, and there's people in the green room, and you've got to socialize because the label came, and your agents are there, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and it's exhausting to watch it.
Yeah, and all the while, there you are, it's night 27, and you have a auditorium or a stadium full of people that are there for a really, really special thing.
Correct, and they paid a lot of money to be there, and you've got singers up there going, I just want to blow my brains out. Like literally. You look at them performing, and listen, there are a lot of singers that get on the stage and they light up because the energy lights them up. And I always tell them, remember what it's going to feel like when you hit the stage. I know you're tired right now. It's 6 o'clock, right? You've got 3 hours. But then they hit the stage, and there's the energy and the fans, and that's what they do it for, right? It's a lot of ego. A lot of ego, yeah. I said to I don't want to name names again, but one of my clients is a very, very big writer, producer, DJ, a lot of different things. And they also are very much into real estate and finance and all this stuff. And he says to me, I'm going to retire. I'm not going to do this anymore when I'm 40. I think he was 28 at the time. I think he's in his early 30s now. And I said, don't be so sure. I said, your ego won't let you quit. I said, why do you think all these old guys are still out playing? Yeah, they need the money, but certain guys don't need the money. I mean, you look at I don't know, who do we know that's still touring? Look at Steven Tyler. Good Lord. It's ego. It's ego, and it's the fire they get from the fans. It's like this. You go out on stage, and it's like, I'm the girl standing right there at the door with my inners as they all walk out on stage, and I watch this on a weekly, monthly basis, and I'm in auditoriums with 40,000 people just screaming, going berserk, and I'm like, God, this is so. I feel like I'm in a parallel universe because none of it's real. I mean, it's really not. It's really the craziest thing when you're working backstage and the artists go out and they do their thing. And I don't want to blow anybody's fantasy bubble, but most of the artists are like, oh God, I just want to go to bed. But what keeps them there are the lights and the ego and the fans and the energy, and I think that's what keeps them going because that's what they started it for. And so it's a love-hate. They don't want to be on tour, but they cannot get enough of what they get from the fans. So it's a very weird, does that make sense? It's a very weird combo.
Gives us a different perspective when we're sitting at that concert watching and you're trying to imagine the mental gymnastics that are going on behind the scenes during the performance. So thanks for sharing that. I think that perspective is interesting and important for us. And I do think it's really valuable that we think about what are we actually suited for when we're looking at our career choices, when we're inventing our future.
Yeah.
who am I? What do I really want out of this?
So I'm so glad that you said that, Zac, because you asked me a question earlier that was, why did you choose this business?
Yeah.
The real answer for me was that I was in the music business, right? I was on the label end and the marketing end and the management end. And what I saw, I didn't love. I saw the touring. I saw the tired voices. I saw the people in tears. I saw the artists that wanted to be home. I saw that as I was moving into vocal coaching, but I still had my day job, which was marketing and sales in the music business. I saw all of that, and I wasn't a writer. I wasn't a particularly good writer. Everything I did sounded dated. I mean, that might be cool now, but it wasn't then because
retro.
I can tell you what it's missing and instrumentation and what I'd like to hear, but I can't bake the cake. I can only decorate it. And so, for me, I felt like I wasn't suited for the business. I knew that I was going to be tired by the time I rolled into 30, and that I was not going to want to do this. I had a front row seat, and I wasn't suited for it. And so I think it was that combo platter, as you said, of saying, how can I really make a difference? I have no control over being an artist. I may be struggling my entire life. I may barely be paying my bills for 25 years. Will that make me happy? No. What's going to make me happy? Money? Control? This is just me, by the way. Everybody's different. Money, control, and making a difference and doing something that I didn't have to love, but I had to like, right? I had to like it. And I felt like being an artist was a lonely struggle. It was a lonely path that was not going to serve me very well financially, and I felt very out of control doing it. And so I chose, the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And thank God I did.
Right.
Thank God I did. Thank God I did what I did, because I'm so grateful.
Yeah. And your clients are grateful.
They're so grateful.
They're so grateful.
Yeah,
they're
so
thanking
grateful.
God that you made that choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this, I'm going to transition to the part now where we tell the future with remarkable accuracy.
We're going to try anyway.
Just wait. This is very, very open-ended, and I don't know that it's leading anywhere, but I wonder, because you have this perch on the side of the stage, like you described. You're able to step back and look at the music industry without all the trappings of trying to be the artist.
Right.
You've seen the business side, you've seen the artist side, you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and also the beautiful and the sublime and the musical and all of that. There's been a lot of change in the music industry. It's constantly changing. Did I mention Ari's book is in its 3rd edition in 6 years? That's because he's like, I got to rewrite this damn thing because everything has changed.
5 years. I couldn't put it down, and my editor is about ready to strangle me. I'm like, but I just have to add one more thing.
So my question for you, very broadly, is, where do you see the music industry in 10 years? What do you feel like it's going to look like? Or 5 years, or next year, or even this year? What do you see where are the artists that you're working with, where are they heading that's different from what we have now? And to try and bring it home to our purposes, how can we prepare for that kind of future? I mean, that's a big question. I didn't prepare you for this question, so that's a little unfair. But
I think that from what I saw in the 80s and the 90s, where people were no longer buying music, we went to streaming. I'm like, what's streaming? I just didn't get it for the longest time. It's a totally different business model. All the money is coming from touring, so that changed a lot. And now I'm seeing the artist side of it. As I mentioned earlier, sadly, there's so many bells and whistles, right, that I'll tell you what I'm worried about. I'm worried that singers are going to stop singing. I know that a lot of country artists, they would never touch auto-tune 10 years ago. They're tuning now because they're trying to keep up with everybody that is tuning. Sometimes you do have to tune live because you're in huge auditoriums and you just need to move that needle just so to put the performance on. But we listened to music in the 80s. I don't know who's a Tears for Fears fan, but one of my favorite bands on the planet. I can't. I just love them so much. The Hurting, 1980.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. Those were bands that we listened to that we love, like Blondie and even like death metal we were talking about earlier, you know? I mean, like this terrible heavy metal. And we had, you know, I was a dancer, so I was like Depeche Mode, Duran Duran, you know, the Pet Shop Boys. My brother was more into the Sex Pistols and Blondie and all of that. But we had musicians, right? We had the Police who got up. I went into London. I snuck into a pub when I lived in England with my older brother for like 7p and got to watch the Police. We'll never forget that in my entire life. And we didn't care that they were cracking and breathing and being human beings on stage. And now everybody's a robot. You know, I said to someone the other day, I said, boy, we were on a show that they had a couple of different artists come in, and they had someone very famous go before my artist, and I said they should have just put a cardboard cutout of him and pushed play. That would have been probably just as interesting. Music has become one-dimensional for many reasons. Usually you'd go and it was more three-dimensional, and you'd have your sets, right? You'd have the artist, and you'd have the band playing, and you have the backup singers. Now everything's run through track. Everything's going through the computer. We've got stacks and stacks of background vocals. We've got singers singing over themselves the whole record. It's actually playing in the house, and they're singing over themselves, and they think they're singing. I actually walked out on a rehearsal a month ago because of that. And I said, I can't do anything with this person until they actually sing. So don't call me back until they're singing, because this is bullshit. And I said, you're doing your artist a great disfavor, if you will, by allowing them to do that, because everybody's gotten so lazy. Yeah. Well, we have to sound a certain way. So when you ask me where it's going, my fear is that is going to keep happening the more we have computers and fake pictures. You know, AI. I mean, what are we going with SAG now? Right now, nobody's working, and everything's.
Although they came to an agreement today.
They did. I heard that just this evening. Thank God! Yay! I feel like artistry is being replaced by technology, and there is a place for Pro Tools and Ableton and Logic and you know, editing and all of that. We have a need for it. But where does it begin and where does it end? It's a very blurred line, and I guess my worry is that people are turning into musical robots. And I don't go to shows anymore. I mean, I don't go to them because that's all I do for work, but I know too much. So I go to a show and I'm like, I'm the sad person going, I'd rather go to a DJ set and just listen to music and dance now. You know, I don't really want to care to hear someone sing. And I'm like, are you singing though? Are you really singing?
When you know how the sausage is made, right?
Yeah, I can hear the tune. I can hear, that's not, you know, so it becomes, you're sort of like, it's not a good disillusionment in any way. And I think, I really, the answer is I don't know. I don't know, but I worry for artists because right now they're being worked like dogs. They are not human beings. They are just people that are churning out money for people who are money grabbing. And that's what I'm seeing. And I'm battling it internally on a daily basis.
I have an optimism that I'm going to share with you.
Share me the optimism,
Here comes.
Zac.
We need some optimism right about now. There's a trend, and there's a trend that's happening that is starting to really get going, and that is the acceptance of popular music in the academy. And by the academy, I mean all of it, schools, generally speaking. When I first started at college, I had very, very few options for where I could go to school because I was into jazz and I wanted a degree in jazz studies. I had to get a bachelor's degree in classical music, which I'm very, very glad I did. That I mentioned I'm playing Bartok tomorrow, so
yes,
I love
amazing.
that I get to do that. But back then, jazz was just getting accepted into the academy. In fact, I got a master's degree, but that was it. There were no doctorates. And so at the time, I got what was considered a terminal. It's like, that's it. Mm-hmm. There are now plenty of doctorates in that area. And that acceptance has now been around for several decades. Popular music is just starting. And really, there's some schools that were out front with this. USC is definitely one of those. And I'll tell you what, if you look at all the people who are touring out there, more and more, they are graduates of that popular music program that happened
Berkeley
at
and
USC.
USC.
And Berkeley and USC.
Yeah. Berkeley, I have a lot of Berkeley.
Frost School and University of Miami.
Yeah.
These schools are happening. But we started looking at that and trying to create a program here. It's about 7 years ago, we started looking into it. Hit some roadblocks. At the time, there were 5 or 6 schools that we could identify that were doing this academic acceptance of popular music. We're back at it. We're looking at building a program. Stay tuned. We're working on it. But with that said, there are now about 60 programs nationally that are doing this in the United States of America. And I know that sounds like that this is to an extent self-serving. Hey, we want to do this thing. Come and join us. But really, the optimism that I want to bring to this is that there is now a place where young people who want to get into music but would never have joined a classical or a jazz program are going to have a place where they can study academically and musically and properly and theoretically and physiologically, where they can study the music that we're talking about, so that they don't start out like your Lollapalooza first concert situation where somebody just got TikTok famous and now they have a deal and we're going to put them out there and hope for the best. Woohoo, right?
I love that. Yeah, I think that, a lot of people, though, that I'm finding are not people that are going to school. They're not college students. They're students that live in small towns or Kentucky or Alabama or Louisiana, or they got TikTok famous.
Yeah.
And they were that was, or Instagram famous. Now it's all TikTok, but they were able to create some type of a build for themselves that they're very grateful for, and it got them to LA to pursue a career. So they don't really have any training because they're just not college students.
Yeah. My theory and my optimism is based on the idea that there is now a place that more people are going to feel welcome to come and do this thing that they want to do. And there are going to be plenty of those folks, and there always have been. The Paul McCartneys of the world who never learned to read music. He did okay. That's real. That's totally legitimate. But that there's a place now where we can raise the standard, where we can have a population of people, and if it's that they're mostly the folks who are in the band and in the background singers, that they're holding the level high. So I'm committed to seeing more and more of that happening, and I'm committed to having students who are accepting of that. I happen to know there are a couple of students here from California School of the Arts. Shout out California School of the Arts. Just opened a popular music program at a arts magnet high school. The high schools are doing it before us. And if we're catching the students who love this and who want to do this while they're in school and they're like, oh, that's a place, I can do that. And there's a class for that. I think we're going to come back to a higher level of musicianship because we are heading in the wrong direction.
I hope so. I think, I was just going to say, if we did that across the countries with all these schools and the music programs, boy, would we we think we've got a saturated market now.
Right.
It would kind of push out and weed out the people that are not serious, or maybe they didn't have an opportunity to do it, So I think being more educated, I would like to see people come out of the collegiate level a little bit more trained on vocal anatomy. I don't know if they're not paying attention in class and their teachers taught them. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of that going on too. But I like to quiz, I quiz my students. I don't care who they are. I quiz John Bon Jovi. I said, what are your vocal cords made of? Where are they located? What's a strap muscle? What's MTS, MTD? What are vowel modifications? Where are your bridges and why? What does that mean? Nobody knows this. They come in and I've had 5 teachers. That's great. Well, let's see what's working, what isn't, and why. And I start to take them through, and they can't answer one question.
Music 71A and B and 72 at PCC. You will learn these things.
We need it.
I think I saw Roger Guerrero. Is Roger here? Everett said, talk to this guy.
We need it.
So I would love for this audience to have an opportunity to ask you some questions. I think it's time for some questions. I'll bet there are some. I think Professor Lopez over here with the microphone. If you just want to put up a hand, he'll come and find you, and let's get some questions going.
Ask away. It's the best part.
Hi.
I'm going to do this.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm a vocal student here, and I also teach Alexander technique, which was developed by an actor with dysphonia. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, if the people you work with have tried it, if you've tried it, kind of where it fits into that whole support ecosystem.
Yeah, so great question. So I started out as an actor. I was in Howard Fine's master class. I don't know if anyone knows who Howard Fine is, but he's been around forever. And we learned a lot of those principles, the Alexander technique. Most of my actors do the Alexander technique, and they understand that. My singers don't, though, because they're musicians, and it has, for them, nothing to do with their culture. They don't really get it. They didn't go to acting class. So sadly, they don't have that. There's a lot of breathing and motion in that as well, which is so fantastic for any person. I tend to, breathing is a big thing, right? Because in Alexander, if I remember correctly, it's just a lot of breathing, and it's a lot of physicality and letting go and all of that. And I think that's all very, very important for singers to have. And I think more people should study it. I really do. I think it would be super helpful, because I'm constantly trying to get them to transfer energy somewhere else, so that they're not stuck in one place, right? There's a flow of energy all the time. But I would say that most of my singers, the majority of them don't. They wouldn't even know what that was. My actors do, but my full pop singers, contemporary singers, don't really know what that is. But I think it's something that is incredibly helpful and should be introduced for sure. People with dysphonia, they're using the muscles right in their neck to grab. They're very strong. And those start to take over, and the vocal cords, right, go to sleep. And I think the Alexander technique, it gives you that energy and synergy in another part of the body, so that you're not squeezing. And I think all my singers should take a class. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they all should take those classes. I don't teach them. I know about them, but I think they're hugely, hugely beneficial.
Do we have another question?
My name is Talia. I am a singer, songwriter, and recording artist, and also a PCC alum, which is an entrepreneurship program. And I was wondering, as a creative who works in the nightlife and hospitality industry, how would you, I guess, suggest balancing like the energy output as well as like mental, emotional stress, kind of everything you're taking working in the hospitality industry with being a creative and a very sensitive and emotional person that's trying to...
So you work in hospitality, but you're a singer-songwriter. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah. So that's a really tricky balance, because that's a really tricky balance because...
Poor mic technique.
Oh, I heard you loud and clear. So you're a singer. You have a nice, resonant, projective voice.
Thank you.
That's a very difficult one, because it's late hours and it's at night and there's not a lot of sleep going on, and then you have to get your rest and you have to sing. And yeah, gosh, great question too. I have a lot of singers that are bartending, and they're losing their voices, and I've had to talk to them about that. I'm like, you've got to stop doing that. You've got to find another job. You're talking in loud spaces all the time. You're talking over noise. Your vocal cords can't withstand that. I mean, they just really can't. And then you find yourself on vocal rest all the time, because you're trying to get over the 2 nights you had to work because you got to sing tomorrow. It's a constant, you're chasing yourself type of situation. One of the reasons I didn't go back into bartending and waitressing, is what I did was a food server all through college and beyond that, was because I was worried about that. I was a singer, and I thought, oh geez, I got to get a real job. I'll get like a desk job, that I could at least work and be quiet. So it's really a difficult balance. And if you find that you can't balance it with vocal rest and enough sleep, you are going to have to change gears.
Sure.
You're going to have to change gears, because we're just not built to do all of that. I can feel it when I go to a show. I'm like, anybody that needs to talk to me when I'm done and when I'm outside, but I just can't talk over music for half an hour. I'll feel it. I have cords of steel. And I've sung through the most ridiculous things before. but you can only handle so much as a human being. Even if you're talking through, you don't want to be too high and you don't want to be too low. You're talking through it, right? You're talking like write one energy words and you're and you're trying to speak in a certain way that you don't lose your voice. Even that can be exhausting because you have to think about it all the time. So if you find that your hospitality job is winning the battle, you might have to shift gears if the singing and songwriting is ultimately what you want to do. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're
I appreciate
welcome.
it.
We have another question here. Okay. Oh, there you go.
Hi. Hi. Sorry about that. My name is Michelle, and I have my question is about your experience as a singer. You've been around the artists, but you've also had the advantage of studying marketing and sales. For a singer, how much marketing and sales should an independent artist look forward to learning and grasping just to make a hit?
Well, you would talk about the music industry changing. That's how it's changed. So before they have managers, but now everything is pay to play. You had, back in the day, somebody would see you in a bar, they'd see you performing, and they'd see the whole vision, and they're like, I want you, and they have A&R going out and finding these special people. Now we're just finding them on TikTok because they recorded something with auto-tune that wasn't even them with a track underneath, and it went viral, and all of a sudden they have a record deal. So that's what we're battling with, and I think you have to know a lot because you're marketing yourselves. I mean, half of these kids are doing all their marketing. They're doing their Instagrams and their fashions and their photo shoots, and they're having to pay their managers to spend any time with them like a publicist. A manager now, unless you have any type of traction or any type of funding behind you, you're paying that manager like a publicist from $2,000 to $10,000 a month. It's expensive. And if you don't understand how to level yourself up, that's part of the mental health problem that we're having, is these artists can't focus on the artistry because they're so stuck in the business. They're doing the business and they're going and recording. They've paid for a producer in a studio and they have to get these 3 tracks done, but they're so worried about getting them done because time is money, they're not in it. And it's really tough to watch that. And I always tell my singers, I go, I don't have a solution for you as you're starting out, but you have to compartmentalize and walk away from the business and get into the studio and just feel and vibrate. Because if you don't feel it, nobody's going to listen to it. And so, yes, you need to know a lot because you're working 24/7 for your own career and you're turning into this crazy person on your phone or, trying to, oh my God, it's a constant. And that's one of the things that I'm not loving that I'm seeing. And that's where that mental health thing, that's what we're talking about. And you just do have to be very adept at how to do that. And you know what? You can have the best marketing skills in the world. You could do everything right and still nothing will work. And you could do nothing right and something works. You know what I mean? I mean, it is. It's all, it's skill and it's artistry, but it's also a lot of luck. So there's not like a magic bullet, but yes, artists today are involved in their careers more than ever because they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Good question.
Had another.
The question here.
Hi, Valerie. Oh man, this is really
Hello.
Yours is really loud. Okay. I am Sarah. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your stories. It's just so amazing to listen. So I actually have a lot of questions, but I'll just ask one for now. My one question is as a singer, I hope or aspire to dance and perform and sing at the same time. And when you hear about people like Beyonce, she runs and sings. And I tried doing that, but the throat just gets so dry. So I was wondering if you recommend that or if you have any tips on how to go about that.
I am so glad that you asked me that question because I'm telling you, there's a whole thread of people out there and speech therapists involved. We have a lot of speech therapists, no disrespect. I would love to have gone and gotten my PhD. I have a little bit of jealousy about it, I'm not going to lie. But I don't need to go there anymore because I have enough on the docket, as it were. But you're seeing a lot of SLPs, speech therapists, rise up, and they're going to school and they're getting the doctor behind their name and they're speech therapists. And they realize that it's groovier being a vocal coach. And so you have a lot of singers that are going to school to become speech therapists, but then they're voice coaching. And the problem is they don't really understand how to become how to be a voice coach. They're giving tips and tricks and things like that. I actually had a speech therapist that I know in LA, and this particular person was telling people to run on the treadmill and sing, and I almost lost my mind. A lot of people do it, and there are a few people that can sustain it, and they feel like it's working for them. But the people that I know that do it and sustain it are like Beyonce and are very physically fit. They're also athletes in their own right, or they're like workout fiends. And so that sometimes somehow they manage it. But for the majority of people, it's not a good idea. I'm a runner. I am a lifter. I do Pilates 3 days a week. I'm a huge into physical fitness and health. I think it's the fountain of youth. So I do know a great deal about running and lifting and all of that. When you're running, when I'm sprinting, I am using strap. You'll see me, I watch myself in a mirror, and when you're doing that and you're breathing in and out trying to sing, it's very, it could be very damaging, because what you're doing is you're using muscles in the neck that you're trying to disengage when you sing. So you're kind of telling your body to do something that the teacher just told you not to do. So I did see one of my clients doing this on Instagram, and she comes in periodically. So she'll pop in for like 3 lessons a year. You know, she's that girl. And then she just throws it to the wall to see if it sticks when she's on tour. And she has a really big voice. And I saw her running with her knees like tires on the field, like football players. And I thought, oh God, I'm gonna get into trouble, but I just can't. So I DM'd her and I said, hey, don't do that. And she's like, why? I see all all these other artists doing it. I go, because you're already a puller. You're pulling chest voice too much. That's your tendency. I know you're vocal. And you're going to strain even more when you run, and it's going to wear you out, and you're going to hurt your voice doing that when you run. So I'm not saying don't do it, because some people do it and it works for them. But the majority of people, I put them on a big fitness ball. Have you seen those big fitness balls that you get on and you do ab work and sit-ups? I put them on that, and I have them bounce and sing, because it's got shock absorbers. It's got a give to it, and you can sit on it and bounce and get your cardio, and you can still sing without grabbing and running and hitting the floor when you run. Even if you're on a treadmill and it's got a slight shock absorber, it's not going to be the same as sitting on a fitness ball and bouncing and singing. So there are ways to do that athletically and singing, so that you can have athleticism and sustainability for tour. Did I answer that?
Yeah, really well.
Okay, cool.
If I can just ask like a follow-up, so say you are dancing and then you're singing, and you're like on the practice session to like make that performance happen. Do you just like, okay, that's only the time I'm gonna like dance and sing? There's like no other like running and singing thing.
I find dancing to be more natural, because what's happening is you're moving your head, you're moving your shoulders, you're moving your hips, you're moving your whole body, and that's sort of you're in flow. When you're sprinting and running, you're not in flow. I mean, I ran track. I'm not in flow. I'm like, I'm going to kill you. You know what I mean? I'm like, you're not in flow mode. And so when you're singing and you're dancing, you're in movement. If you're hip hop, whatever it is that you're doing, there's a flow to it, and you're moving your head and your neck, and that's actually really good for your head. I always tell people, you have to sing like a bobblehead. When you're singing correctly, your voice is outside you. You never feel it. You should never feel your voice, ever. It should be something completely outside you that is you're just thinking it and it's happening. That's a much longer conversation. That's like a private lesson or 10 or a read of my book. It's in there. But you should just feel like you're free and you're a bobblehead, and everything chest to mixed to head, and there's no vocal disturbance at all. So I think dancing's okay as long as you're not completely winded and out of breath. You do need to get your physical fitness up and then balance that with the singing, and maybe not do it too long. You don't want to do it for hours at a time. I think that some artists also over-rehearse. I have an over-rehearser right now. Yeah. We just dealt with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I had one singing and another singing and one third singing, and they were all could hear each other, and they were dying laughing, because I have one that's like throat to the wall to see if it sticks, and I had another that's like, I'm going to practice it over and over and over and over and over again, and that's not good either. So sometimes you have to have a little bit of balance.
Well, we've already established that sleep is important, so I think we have time for one more question if there's somebody out there.
to get my fitness in here. Here we go.
Would you please sing while you do your cardio?
Yes, there you go. Upstairs. Let's do the stairs and sing.
Hi, my name is Ali, and I have a question for what are the main takeaways you want your artists to acknowledge once you're completed with their season of work or projects?
Well, it's ongoing for me, so it's kind of like an athlete. If you're an NBA star or you're a football player, you're never not going to show up and strength train with your coach and your team. I don't care how good you think you are, because at some point you're going to get hurt, you're going to get injured, and that's what singers do. So you find, for me, it's, I don't really know that there's a takeaway. I mean, it's a little bit of a broad question. I think that training is training and teaching is teaching, and it's very much ongoing. And if you're really good at your job, you keep your clients for decades at a time. You retain them because they're constantly learning. So I don't really know. Is there something more specific?
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, I just think it's an ongoing endeavor, and it's never really done. It's just sort of this open-ended idea that as long as you're an athlete and that's what you want to do for a living, you have a coach and that you trust and you can fall into, and there's a path there that you're headed on. So I don't know that it's any one thing or another, but I think it's multifaceted.
Well, what can I say, Valerie? Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I think I'm really thrilled with the conversation, because I think we got to some good stuff, and I hope that was some good stuff that we were able to share with you, that your insights are unique to your special place in the industry, and I just feel like we're really lucky to have you here. Thank you for taking the time with us.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
I'm gonna twist Valerie's arm and hope that she'll stay a little bit. We've got some lovely food outside, so stick around, and we'll go have some snacks, and you can maybe get another question or two in if you get a chance. But we need to let Valerie get home and get to sleep.
Get to sleep, because I've got a lot of clients.
Important.
But I just wanted to say one quick thing again. We'll have the books. I think there's some of the books out front if you want to grab one and buy one. We're selling them a little cheaper than they are online. They're pretty inexpensive, but it's a really great read. I'm going to show it to you, because this has been my life's work, and it's not a boring book about anatomy. I promise you, I don't want to read a vocal book about anatomy. I'll be asleep by the second page. I won't even make it through a chapter. This is very unique, because there's stories about all of my clients in here, and you can kind of guess who they are. What worked, what didn't, why, how they failed, how they fell on their face, and how we got them back on track. And it's really a coffee table book for anybody that has a voice, uses a voice for their living. You don't even have to be a singer. You can be a speaker, an orator, sales, marketing. Anybody that has a voice, which we all do, should read this book. And it also does dive into the mental health. We have all my artists that you see up there in this book, and they've given quotes. And I think it's a fast read, and I'm really passionate about it. And I hope that you'll grab a copy and try it.
Definitely. So we'll have those up front. Next week, we have Ari Herstand, the best-selling author of the book that we use here in our business class. He's going to do a lecture he's going to answer the question further, the future of the music business. And so I do hope that you will join us for that. And I will look forward to further conversations out on the patio. Let's go get some snacks. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Val.